first, you just like music. And like most people, you're not exactly sure why, you just do. It is everywhere. And when we pay attention, we notice that it's a pretty significant part of our world. Music is obviously important to people around us. Important people, our parents, family, and friends. They are all enjoying it, or at least listening to it. Companies know it has power because they use it to sell you things. Movies wouldn't be the same without it. So, we kind of take it for granted that it's a thing. But at some point, something special happens to some of us. Some band, some song, or someone gets your attention, and then it becomes personal. At that point, music gets elevated to something special, something truly meaningful. And when that happens, music also becomes powerful, transformational, and sometimes almost magical. And for most people who have this kind of experience, they are hooked for the rest of their lives. And then the cycle starts all over again as they pass their interest and their love of music on to the next generation. That has been going on for a very long time. For some of us, we find ourselves pursuing music. We decide, or maybe we can't help ourselves, that we will go beyond just enjoying music, just listening to it. We want to be part of it. We want to shape a little bit of the music for ourselves, even while that same music shapes us. And once that starts happening, our individual journey has begun. Each one is unique. Each one is personal. And because of this journey, our lives are more rich, more colorful. And for most who go down this road, it'll never end. And whether or not we realize it, we are on our own music quest. So, I ask, what happens when we try to share with each other our own journeys, especially when they can be so very different? Well, sure, it's possible, but it helps if we can know how to relate to the different paths that are available to all of us. I have some observations to share on how to better understand what is likely to be part of any one person's music quest. And since my lifelong friend Brian has been a key part of my own musical journey, he and I would like to introduce you to some of these ideas. These concepts will be regularly revisited in one form or another throughout all the different series and projects that we will be sharing as part of Music Quest. So Brian, thank you for indulging me.
Sure. You know me. I'm all about indulgences.
Yeah, this is something that is falls in the category of I know that you and I have enough similarities that we can have a conversation, and yet I also realize that we don't have any problem, bringing our own opinions to whatever our conversation is. So that's a nice thing to have. When it comes to music, there's no way I can even think about music without it including you, just because of our history.
Long history there.
I've told this story more than once, and I'm going to, I guess, add it to this as well. I remember you playing your guitar, walking down the dorm hall.
Really? I was walking with the guitar?
No. I would be walking,
you were walking down the hall.
And your door would be open, and you'd be sitting on your bed playing your guitar.
Yeah.
And I distinctly remember, that's nice. He needs to keep practicing. It's true.
I got better.
No, you did. I tell people, and I've done this more than I've said that, I consider you the best rhythm guitar player I personally know. And if you know anything about guitar work, I think that's a very high praise.
Or if we know anything about your sphere of influence.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But there's a lot of guitar players, but a lot of them could play rhythm better. This isn't about cracking on guitar players, but it's about our history together.
Yeah.
And the thing about Music Quest that matters to me is that it's been a really, really fantastic way to connect with just different interesting people over the years.
Yeah.
I love music, But I've loved the parts of my life that included making music, helping others make music, just involving music. And the whole idea of how to talk to people and engage them in regards to music, to me, I guess I got way too philosophical. I mean, I think it's a huge thing. And I think a lot of people just do it naturally. And they don't think about it. They don't need to. It's natural.
Yeah, it's the universal common denominator. No matter who you are in the world, music, if you don't speak a language and you're in a foreign country, or music, and all of a sudden it's a bridge.
And it's so true, like so many truths, it's become almost cliche.
Yeah.
And so I think when something becomes cliche, it almost gets devalued. And so I say that I just want to highlight the fact, no, it really is that awesome. I mean, music really does do that bridge. So the thing is, though, and the whole point of our little discussion right now is that everyone's journey can be so ridiculously different. And so it's such a rich thing that it's so broad and so deep that two people can be swimming in this river of music and never bump into each other.
True.
So I guess I just want to acknowledge the fact that our background has put us in, I guess, a North American mainstream mindset of kind of,
for the most part,
blues, rock, gospel-ish. I don't know. I don't necessarily want to leave out some genre, but I mean, that's kind of what we've related to.
Sure.
And so that's
country is in there.
Yeah, well, of course. I mean, you being in Nashville,
folk.
It's a good thing that you didn't hate country, seeing how.
Right.
I mean, but even after all these years, you don't consider yourself necessarily country.
Folk, believe it or not, folk music, when I say folk music, that's a broad thing, but my dad's album collection had the Kingston Trio.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, you got Bob Dylan, and some of these people on some albums that I'd never heard of that I thought were really great. Arlo and Woody Guthrie, Simon and Garfunkel.
So I guess my point is that we're not necessarily trying to focus on any one particular genre, but we have to acknowledge where we're coming from.
Your influences, they infuse you, and they come out some way or another.
Definitely.
And I know that I weave stuff like that. My influences are woven into most everything that I do.
So, in as much as we've made those acknowledgments, and hopefully by listening to us banter for a few seconds, people have a little bit of our relationship. But over the years, you and I have done a lot of music together in one form or fashion. And so I came up with 3 lists, and I went over them briefly with you just to make sure that I wasn't completely in left field. These lists...
There's something to be said for a good left fielder.
Okay.
I mean...
Yeah. So the thing is, I don't have necessarily titles, or these lists are not necessarily considered final in any way. I can't say I've gone through massive academic rigor to construct these. They're just purely my experience. But I'd like to make them broad enough so that anybody who would think they were on a music quest could relate to them in some form or fashion. So the first list, like I said, I'm going to look at this real quick. I'm going to see if I can remember this. It's basically how we interact with music.
Sure.
And so step 1, when people interact with music, do you remember you don't have my list, but I mean, do you remember
what
we're talking about?
It's right here at my feet.
Yeah, but you don't have it memorized.
The
first thing we do is we listen.
First of all, you're a participant in that. You're on the receiving end of something musical, and you are listening. Some folks, they love to listen to music. Don't play it at all. They'll say, well, I play the radio.
Right.
And you have to have those people.
Well, sure. I mean,
you got to have an audience, and so not everybody can be the baker. Somebody's got to eat the cake.
the idea that somebody could have such a deep connection with music and not be a musician is not a foreign idea to me. They just love it.
Mm-hmm.
They study it. They partake in it. So just the first step of listening and enjoying music, that's a way hopefully almost everybody interacts with music. I mean, if you're a musician that's been writing songs forever and you just don't like listening to music, I guess I can see how people get there. But generally, we kind of take for granted that first step of just listening, just enjoying it. So that's one thing. Another thing would be performing. You're performing music, sing, play, whatever. You're generating the sound waves at one point, and that's a way we engage music.
Yeah, and under performance, it's, and you'll get into this, I'm sure, it's different than the creating it.
Now, that would be what I would have on the next thing.
Performance is, there are some people that are gifted performers, and that is what they do, and they do it well. And many of those don't write. They don't play an instrument. Some of them do play an instrument, but they don't necessarily create their original songs for performance, and that can never be underestimated. A good performance can take a real crappy song.
That's true.
And bring it to life.
So that you talked about creating. I mean, the idea of actually writing the music, coming up with the idea and converting it into a musical thought, and it being originated by you. That's another way we engage music.
Yeah.
So we listen to it, we perform it, and we can create it, write it. Another thing that's been a huge part of our history is what I'm calling capturing it.
Right.
And you're basically taking those sound waves and running it into some sort of system so it can be presented again. If it's live music, I call that capture. You're mixing it together and putting it out some speakers so people can hear it better. I call that capture, but really when you think capture, it's more of recording.
I do, but you're right. The sound reinforcement or live is the same. For your audience, for that person who's the listener, it's just as important for that moment.
Yeah, for that
as
moment.
It is to be recorded for posterity, but recording is.
So on my list, I've rolled live reinforcement and recording kind of together.
Sure.
They're different. Well, that's obvious, but they're conceptually similar. So someone who develops the expertise and loves the process of recording or mixing sound or that kind of stuff, that's a way to engage music. The last one's the one I had the most problem with as far as how to label it. But it's more of the idea of promoting music or what was the other word we came up with?
You enable.
You're enabling
music. And you're enabling and promoting it.
So that captures almost everything else related to
marketing,
music.
Management, and beyond.
So if somebody is really loving music and really pursuing it, and they're not listening to it, and they're not performing it, and they're not writing it, and they're not capturing it, that's that last category. And there are people who are really into music. That's what they do.
Yeah, and it takes those kind of folks too.
So the whole point of this list is that anybody that you engage when it comes to music, on any kind of music quest, they're going to fit into one of those categories, and most likely multiple of those.
Yeah.
I mean, you can find people that every one of those applies to them, but there are some people who really focus on it. So those are all legit. So that first list, I'm not too sure what to call it, but we'll different projects we do under Music Quest, we'll harken back to different aspects of that list. So that one's kind of obvious. I mean, that does capture everything. But there's another list I came up with that kind of focuses on kind of what's your goal. What are you trying to do with your music? I mean, why are you engaging it? And it's kind of a lifestyle type thing.
Right.
And some of the variables in that list, I think the first one I kind of do is whether or not it's kind of casual or if it's like a full-time thing. And there's a lot of casual musicians out there.
There's a lot of folks that, for them, it's a hobby, and kind of like painting would be, photography, flying kites,
Yeah,
raising lizards. I don't know. And they enjoy that. It's always, for me, it's a way of expression. It's therapeutic, especially creating it.
You know, now that I think about it, this particular list, though, when we were talking about it earlier, just kind of briefly to make sure that we were compatible on this conversation, this list is really not as focused on, say, the listener or the promoter. I guess promoter could be full, but just the listener, it wouldn't be a full-time thing. But it really starts focusing on the performer or the musician.
Somebody who's wanting to be actively engaged.
So that's what we're talking about. So you can do it casually, but the full-time person, there's a scale. Almost every one of these things I'm talking about at this point on this list, it's more of a scale. Mm-hmm. Like you got completely casual, completely full-time, and then you have a lot of people that are somewhere.
Variables in between.
Yeah, it's somewhere in there. And you have had points in your life where you were definitely full-time.
Right.
And what we're doing now through some of the Texas Big Star stuff we're doing, you're not a full-time musician. Now, you're doing a lot of music.
Yeah.
But you can't call it full-time now because you're helping on video and other things.
Right.
So you've been to the full-time end of the spectrum. You're still that direction, but you're not full-time.
I consider it full-time creative.
Okay, well that's true.
There's different aspects of who I am and what I do and skills I bring to the table wherever I'm at. So,
exactly.
And you too, same way.
So the idea of this is similar in that casual is at one end of the scale, and on the same scale that I'm talking about is more of for your own enjoyment, versus the other end of the scale being either fame or fortune. And this isn't a linear scale in the way I look at it, because you can go up and that may be focused on fame. And then you can maybe go down, it's just fortune. Now, a lot of times fame and fortune go together, but you can have somebody who's they're all about the cash.
True.
They're doing music just to make a buck.
True.
And then you've got some people who really aren't thinking about that. They just want to be famous. There's a lot of those.
That's more true than ever before.
So that's one end of the scale. The other end is somebody who's only doing it for themselves. They don't care about either one of those things. Mm-hmm. But most people fall somewhere between those ends of the scale.
They have to.
Yeah, it's true.
They have to.
So that's one way to look at what your own goals are. Where am I on that scale? And that's what this scale is all about. It's understanding where any one person is. Because it helps us relate to people. Because if I am only into it for personal enjoyment, and somebody is they're only into it to make a buck, it's hard for them to relate.
Back in the day, when there were a thing called record labels, those people had to relate.
Well, true.
The record business, the recording industry was in an industry to make money. That's what they do. It's a business. And you would have your creative types and your executive types who are there. They don't play the radio, but they would much rather play the radio and hear the artist they just signed a year ago with a #1 hit, making them some cash.
Making money.
And you had those folks in between. You had your marketing, your promotions people, you had your A&R directors, you had management, you had all these different other folks that created that bridge, a buffer, if you will, because there's tons of stories that have been made public of your creative types, your artistic types feuding with the record label, and sometimes rightfully so. A
lot of the conversations that, if we're talking about Music Quest, is going to have to do with the tensions that are naturally in some of this stuff, and not from a confrontational standpoint, but you got different goals, and that's why this list is talking about what your life goals are, because it impacts how you relate to music and how you relate to other musicians. Another one here I have is another scale is versatility versus focused. And those may not be the best words, but if you're like really, really, really focused on the mandolin, back off that scale a little bit, you're into stringed instruments. But then you've got some people who are all about versatility, and they want to play every instrument there
Right.
ever was. Matter of fact, the weirder the instrument, the more they're excited about it because
Sure.
it just lends to that.
That's a
versatility.
creative type that
Sure.
loves to pick up any instrument and can and immediately make noise that is musically palatable with it, whether it be
Yeah.
like me. I was a desktop drummer in school.
Uh-huh.
Pencils, I was that kid.
I bet you were.
Brian, stop it.
So your scale that
Stop
we're talking
whistling.
about this list is the idea that some people are super, super focused on versatility. Other people are just very, very focused.
Very focused.
And that can also be on the next one is
And I
similar.
should add something. Some of the folks that we call very focused on this is all I'm doing, those are purists.
Yeah.
What I would call a purist. I'm bluegrass, and this is what I play. I just play bluegrass. Or I'm a jazz guy. I just love jazz.
That's who you are, and that's
who you
cool.
are, and you live that.
But there are others that don't fall in that category.
Right.
The other linear thing I have going here is expansionist versus comfort. Because when you're pushing borders, you're pushing limits, you're expanding your experience. That is often, for a lot of people, it's the opposite of comfort. Like
Sure.
if you've got 3 bands and you only listen to those 3 bands because you love those 3 bands, I would put you at the end of the scale of comfort. It's just what's comfortable. It's comfort food. It's that kind of thing.
Something you can relate to.
And then you've
it's
got
going to be the
people-
same no matter where you are in the world. I'm going to get that Big Mac at McDonald's. It's going to be the same in Toronto as it is in Tokyo.
It's all about the comfort. And
Or relatability, I like
and
the
you've got
taste
all
of
these
that.
kind of people. You've got some people that I think there are fewer of these that what makes them comfortable is the fact that they're expanding, they're adding, they're out of their comfort zone. Most people are somewhere between those 2 extremes. So
True.
a lot of these lists, I mean, you've got this particular list. Like I said, I'm calling it "What's your goal?" Your lifestyle, casual versus full time, personal enjoyment versus fame and fortune, and then versatility or focused, and similarly comfort versus expansionist. So there may be some other aspects that fall in that category, but I think almost anybody you talk to lifestyle-wise, you can use those things to kind of zero in who they are and what they're all about. So that's my second list. I have no idea what to call it.
Yeah.
But we'll
figure it out.
We'll revisit those. So those are good. I mean,
Yeah.
you relate to
that's-
those.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right down the line.
So I mean, when you meet a new musician, so hey, my cousin's a musician. You need to meet him, and you
What's
meet
my
them.
first response?
What's your first response?
Usually it's great. No, that was a little. It's more like, oh, great, yeah, I'd love to meet him.
The jaded aspect of the facial expression you're making right now is a complete function of the fact that you've been doing this so long.
Been doing it, and at a certain level, you never know what you're going to get.
Well, in my degree, my background, corporate-wise, is technology, and similarly, like, oh, my brother-in-law, he's a computer guy. That could be a lot of different stuff, dude. And
I mean, he's on the computer a lot.
Yeah. So, I mean,
Yeah.
and when people say that, I'm like, really? Cool.
Yeah.
Like what? And then you find out they've got this one little niche, and they really don't know the first thing about computers, but what they're doing is computer related,
Yeah.
and they're a computer guy.
And they work that niche.
Similarly, when somebody goes, I got a
Musicians the
musician
same
friend, you're
way.
like, okay, that
Yeah.
doesn't narrow it down at all for me.
Yeah, for musicians, it's like you said before, there's so many points between the scale of this is what I love to do and this is what I do, that, from here to there, you never know. But there's always a camaraderie with musicians.
Yep. I can see
No
that.
matter what, it's its own
Probably more so than with computer
unspoken
guys.
fraternity.
So that second list, like I said, I don't know what it's called, but what you just said kind of leads into the other list, which is also more focused on musicians.
Right.
And I don't know what this list is, but it kind of has to do with understanding your own or someone else's reality as a musician or as a music enthusiast.
True.
And the first item on that list has to do with what I would call talent or standards.
Sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
how good are you?
DQYDJ.
What's that?
Don't quit your day job.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. So
Versus, hey, what are you doing to excel this talent that you have?
I would say that, any instrument can be played at a very, very high level of quality, but some instruments, it's easier to delineate just by the nature of the way they work. But like a
Right.
classical pianist...
You don't want me playing the trumpet.
Okay, fair enough. But if you think of like a classical pianist, you've got 10 fingers possibly all doing their thing, and their individual notes, and there's an exactness that's required.
Yes.
To consider that high quality.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can play the piano, but you can really play the piano, and so there's this. It's the understanding of what someone's talent level is
And their
skill
capability
level.
to improve.
Yeah.
Much of music is it's a discipline, and we'll probably get to this, that it's a seed of talent that can be improved upon the more you do it. It's becoming comfortable
That's the second point.
Yeah.
Because the one with this, okay, let me finish up the first one though. It's like some of it is just your raw capability, your skill potential. But then the other thing about that is not just your skill potential, but what are your standards? What are you shooting for?
Sure.
If you're just looking to have a good time and you don't really care how much in rhythm you are, you can still have a good time with music. But you're not going to relate well. How many bands have you been in where you're like, this has got to get better, and everybody else is like, it's okay. You experienced that?
Not for very long. If it was rhythmically challenged in any area, we would usually jettison some cargo and find something to take its place.
Okay, so when you talk
someone.
about Music Quest, the understanding of where someone is on skill or their standards, that's pretty important. But similarly, what you just brought up is what we called desire, discipline, and dedication.
Yeah, the 3 Ds. You got to have those things. You have to have those things to move on from that square one.
And when you say move on, personally,
if you so desire to.
Yeah, it's the whole point.
Desire, you have to want to.
Where are you on that scale?
Yeah.
I mean, you've got people over here that are not dedicated. They don't have a whole lot of desire. Just
or
whatever.
discipline, and they're just it's the
And then
casual.
the other end
on Christmas and Easter and New Year's.
Who are some famous musicians that you and I know that nobody would question their dedication and their drive and all that good stuff?
That we know personally?
Not personally, no. I mean, that are famous for that. Like
Tom Petty.
Like Bruce Springsteen, Godfather of Soul, James Brown.
Bruno Mars.
I mean, they're known for having an incredible drive. And that's part of who they are. It's not that they don't have talent, but it's all that other stuff.
Desire and drive to me are kind of that same amalgamation. But you have to, there's something in you that says, I got to make this and do this. And after I'm there, I'm going to make it even better. I'm going to pursue this.
So there's a line, there's a scale there.
Yeah.
And understanding where someone is on that scale is useful.
Yeah, I've taught many a beginner piano and guitar lesson. And from 5 years old upwards to 11 and 12 and 16 years old. You can usually tell immediately, the drive factor. And it's either there or it's, sometimes it's too young to tell. I didn't pick up the guitar until I was 11. But I started playing piano lessons when I was 8. And you can usually tell drive. And after a while, and I tell parents, don't go out and buy a $700 starter guitar, if there is such a thing.
Somebody will go buy a $700
For
guitar
a beginner.
and, quote, call it a beginner guitar.
Yeah, and if they do that, I'm going to say, great, don't sell the guitar, hang on to it, and it's going to retain its value, and later on you might could sell it for a car if you're going to buy a vintage guitar. But I tell them, start off with an inexpensive guitar that's easy to play and nurture the talent.
And see what the desire and interest is.
Sure. And for some folks, it's going to be therapeutic, or the ukulele,
So,
it's going to be, which is cool.
there's another point on this third list, beyond just skill, talent, and the desire, dedication, and discipline. And I call it luck, but it's really not just luck. In that, depending on your reputation, your personal reputation, and your network, if you have a good reputation and your network is broad enough in the right line of business or whatever, in the music crowd, your luck will be better. They were so lucky that they got to do that. Well, it's a function of people like you, and you know a lot of people, so therefore you get lucky.
I've always called it you kicking up some dust.
Okay.
And people from afar can see, hey, there's some dust kicking up over there.
I should go check it out.
Wonder what that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's not pure luck, but when we talked about this earlier, just to confirm we were on the same page, you did bring up the fact that there is just stupid luck. Stuff that you could not plan out. It has nothing to do with your network. You just happen to bump into something, and that's a real thing as well.
Stories throughout history, especially rock and roll history, of
what appear to be just dumb luck.
Yeah, who's the?
But you can't count on
Peter.
that.
It's Peter Noon, Herman and the Hermits.
I don't know this one.
Peter. He wasn't the original singer for the band,
right,
but he came to all their concerts and knew all their songs because he loved to listen to them.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
And their singer was sick. He couldn't make it. I don't know, laryngitis. And they were at the gig. Well, he's not here. He goes, well, I know the tunes. History. And they never called the other guy back.
Okay, but see, the thing is, though, is that, once again, I put that in category of, from a network, he positioned himself to be lucky. He you know what I'm saying?
For it to be lucky. Did he now?
They didn't just know that. He had to physically be in their presence for that luck to kick in.
He might have been a regular that they like, hey, that kid is still there. He was younger than them by a few years. He's still down there. He's in the front row again. Who knows?
All right, so beyond luck, I have something I call like functional or business infrastructure. This is less artsy, less sexy kind of thing, but it's what do you have to work with, just from do you have the tools, do you have the financial backing? All of these kind of things factor into your ability to understand where you're at and where you are at. Like we're in a little studio that we have infrastructure wise. Right. There would be people that look at that and go, oh, how quaint, because they have access to or whatever built like a real studio. And then there are other people
for a price.
Yeah, exactly. But there would be other people who would like, oh man, I would love to have something like that. Right. So we're just, there's this line, but from an infrastructure standpoint, we have a certain level of infrastructure to use, and it impacts what we do. The last one on here that I have on this list is timing. And that has to do with kind of, if you focused on the banjo may or not be all that popular right now. And banjo's perfectly good, but in the bigger scheme of things, banjo may not be cool. But then enough time goes by, and all of a sudden, all the cool songs have banjo in it.
Right.
And so from a timing standpoint, your focus, your specific slice, now all of a sudden is more palatable, more needed, more...
Sure. You become known all of a sudden. You've known yourself for a while, but all of a sudden now you're hip.
So, I mean, there's all kinds of stories of musicians who've been themselves all along, but for whatever reason, they've become cool.
They've been in the shadows and then been there for years, and all of a sudden now they're, hey.
So I call that timing. So those things matter. And I don't know if you can really control that, but it's a factor.
Right.
So this last list, knowing your own reality, having to do with talent, your desire, just your infrastructure, your luck, and then also just the timing of it all. So those all are things that factor into someone's journey, where they are. So those are the three lists. And like I said, over time, we might be able to clean them up, but we'll use these in our discussions. And I think as we talk about Music Quest, I would like anybody who feels like they're on a quest to listen to what we're talking about and go, I can relate to that. That's what this is all about.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good to find yourself somewhere, and hopefully through Music Quest, this program, you'll be able to, I'm thinking if I were looking at it as someone who's a creative and a performer, where am I on these different scales of here to here, and what am I doing to reach my goals?
And you do it naturally, but when you encounter a new musician, hey, I've got this friend who's a musician, you're very quickly assessing really all of these things.
You are, and not necessarily from a selfish point of view,
just
like what can I get out of them. Some folks do that, though.
There are people like that.
Hey, I need you to replace the guitar player that we've had. That happens.
Okay, well, let me throw something in here along those lines. Yeah, there are a number of connections and relationships I have today that started with because I had a particular piece of equipment that they needed.
Sure.
And they became friendly to me because they wanted access to that equipment. Yep. But then over time, we develop a relationship, and then it's beyond that. But I can name off a handful of people that would not be my friends if I hadn't had a certain piece of equipment at one particular point.
And it's that, and when you're talking about musicians that have a certain skill set in their toolbox, in Nashville, where I've been in many a session, you call in all these players, and they have a certain skill set. There's a few that are just utility people. It means they play a little bit of everything. Usually that's string people that can play steel, mandolin, guitar, banjo, acoustic, electric, string, dobro, a utility person. Some are simply concentrating on lap steel, or if they can play lap steel, they can play pedal steel too. That skill set is both, how do you say this? It's needed and it's optimized on both ends of whether you're the person calling for that player, going, "Hey, listen, Jimbo, I need you for a session. We're going from 10 to 2 here next Friday, 10 a.m. Can you be here? Bring your mandolin, or bring this, or bring that." So many times, I think possibly on what you're referencing, you had a piece of equipment and a skill set that you knew how to use it without a lot of fuss. Mm-hmm. They could count on your skill and talent. It's the same way in music too, especially in the recording end of things.
Yeah, and once you start moving down that scale, like we were talking about, between casual and full time, whether or not you're doing it for fun or making a buck, when you're trying to be proficient, efficient, and have a certain level of quality, that's going to demand you knowing how to get what you need quickly and at the quality you need. And that's what you just described. Right. And so as we relate to other people and we talk about different things under Music Quest, all of these things are going to come up multiple times. And I wouldn't say that anything we're talking about should be a new idea, but it might be kind of in your background. You're not thinking of them in these terms. So hopefully by just listening to these lists, we'll put some stuff up having to do with them. We can add to them, discuss them, clean them up with people watching and adding their 2 cents. I think we could all help each other better understand how we can relate to other musicians on our own quest. So from a Music Quest standpoint, we'll be doing different programs. There'll be different slices of this world of music, and we're not trying to be comprehensive.
Right.
Music Quest is not intended to be comprehensive. It's supposed to be positioned so that it could take in almost anything. But as people relate to things or we cover things that interest me or things we've done, they should have to do with slices of this larger definition that we just went through. So, Brian, that's what I wanted to cover. I know it's kind of longer than I don't know how to do it shorter. I mean, this helping people understand the context of what I think of as Music Quest. And in this particular case, I can't do anything I don't want to make excuses for or apologize. I'm approaching it from my personal Music Quest, but I'm trying to do it in a way that invites other people to look at their lives and their quests in a way where we can relate. And that's what we're going for. How would you I mean, I don't want to go into the full story, but have you ever looked at your experience as kind of a quest in those terms?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, in those terms, a music quest. Many times I've run off the trail and kind of gone, I'm kind of done with this quest. But if you're a creative, and I call myself that, I like creating music. You always come back to that.
You can't help yourself.
Yeah, and as far as what the goal is, for a singer-songwriter, creative person, the goal is just to get it out there. And I think every artist wants, deep down, not out of selfishness, but recognition, mostly among peers, to kind of go, that was a great song, man.
Right. I mean, yes, there are elements of that could be nice if you got paid $1, or it was larger.
Nice.
It was a larger audience that really connected with it. But a lot of times, you and I've used this term before. So that's a musician's musician. When
Right.
musicians really dig somebody because there's something they bring to it that's just extra special.
Yeah.
But you kind of have to be a musician to kind of pick up on why that's so awesome.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
and you were talking about creative. I hearken back to, I came home from a corporate day of work in a suit. You were at our house, and I walked in the door and I said, Brian, we have to write a song now, or I'm going to freak out. Because the job I had at that
Therapeutic.
time did not have the kind of creativity that I crave. And so you and I sat down and wrote one of my favorite songs. And it's just, you got to do it.
It has to be done.
It has to be done. And it wasn't for anybody. That one was just to scratch that one itch. I have to do something creative now. And it wasn't for anybody. I didn't think past that. And I just knew that you could help me do that. And we did. Yeah. And like I said, it's one of my favorite songs. So I'm going to not tell anybody what it is, but you know what it is. So thank you for taking the time to listen through this. I don't pretend to think that this is complete, but I hope it does put Music Quest in a certain context for you. And as you look at the material that we publish under Music Quest in that name, I hope that you will hearken back to what we're just talking about and put that in context. That's what this is all about.
That's great.
So thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
And we will keep doing this.
Stay tuned.
So, we really hope that some of what we just covered makes sense and is something that you can relate to. And with that, welcome to Music Quest.